Somewhere between scrubbing the third toilet on the 12th floor and rinsing my gloves in cold water, I realized, the more silent you are, the more invisible you become. And if you keep your head down long enough, people forget you have a spine. My name is Anna Zielinska. I'm 38 years old, originally from Poland, and a single mother to an 8-year-old boy named Oleg. Every morning, I wake up at 4:45, boil eggs, butter a slice of rye bread for my son's breakfast, and put on my gray work uniform. I leave our small apartment in the outer district of Berlin, climb on my old bicycle, and ride into the city as the sky still sleeps. My job? I clean what everyone else leaves behind: toilets, office floors, coffee stains on carpet, crushed sandwiches in trash bins, lipstick marks on mugs. I work for Elite Facility Service Gum, a commercial cleaning company hired to keep the glass towers of Berlin spotless. Even though most of us are treated more like stains than staff, I don't hate the job itself. What I hate is how people treat us, as if we're air, as if we don't exist. They step over the mop without saying excuse me. They dump their leftover takeout on desks we've just wiped. They never say thank you. And worst of all, there's Gisela, our floor supervisor. A bitter, sharp-eyed woman who never misses a chance to dock our wages for sloppy work. It was the last week of October, and Berlin had already turned cold. I was scrubbing toilets on the 12th floor of a tech company's office building, near Charlotte 10th Street, when I heard the familiar click of heels behind me. Anna? Gisela's voice cut through the tiled air like a blade. You left the ladies' toilet on the 10th floor smelling like cigarettes. The VIP guests are coming. This is unacceptable. I stood up, my back aching. I cleaned that floor 30 minutes ago. Someone must have used it after. Her mouth tightened. Are you arguing with me? No, I'm just, you're careless. This will be reflected in your paycheck. You've been warned before. I wanted to scream, to throw the brush across the marble floor, but instead, I nodded and went back to scrubbing. Not because she was right, but because I couldn't afford to lose this job. That evening, I picked Oleg up from school. He jumped into my arms, his small backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Mama, look, I drew you. He handed me a picture, stick figures, him and me with a cape and a mop in one hand. You're a superhero, he said. You clean the world. I smiled, but inside, something tightened. I wish the world would clean itself, or at least clean the way it treated people like me. 3 days later, everything collapsed. A designer handbag went missing on the 12th floor, the same floor I'd cleaned that morning. That afternoon, I was called into the office. Inside sat Franz, head of human resources, wearing a stiff navy suit and colder expression. Gisela stood to his left, and next to her, a younger blonde woman I'd never seen before, probably another administrative assistant pretending she ran the world. The bag disappeared at 15:10, Franz said flatly. You were the only person logged in on that floor at the time. I never even saw a bag, I replied, stunned. Do you deny entering the area? I cleaned the restroom. That's it. We'll be launching a formal review, Franz continued, effective immediately. You are suspended without pay. If theft is confirmed, you may face legal action. I stood there, speechless, my gloves still damp in my coat pocket. I walked out of the building in the cold wind, my face burning. People passed me on the sidewalk, some in suits, some with earbuds, lattes, perfect lives. None of them looked at me. I wasn't surprised. No one ever really looked at cleaners. But that afternoon, as I rode home to my son and tried to hold back the panic, something cracked open inside me. Something long buried, something heavy. Maybe it was the look in Oleg's eyes when I told him I didn't know when I'd be going back to work. Maybe it was how Gisela had smiled faintly, cruelly, as if I were already guilty. Or maybe it was just exhaustion, not from cleaning, but from being treated like I was nothing. That night, I stared at the ceiling of our one-bedroom apartment while Oleg slept beside me, and I made a silent promise to myself. And no more silence. No more bending. No more being invisible. They thought they could break me. They had no idea who I really was. It had been 3 days since I was suspended. 3 days of silence, shame, and sitting on my couch in our tiny apartment, watching the shadows crawl across the walls. 3 days of my son asking, Mama, why aren't you going to work? And me answering with vague smiles and forced calmness. But I wasn't calm. Inside, I was burning, not just from the false accusation, but from something deeper, a slow, simmering anger that had lived inside me for years. That anger had been buried under fatigue, under fear, under the never-ending list of things I had to do just to survive. But now, it was rising. It had a voice, and it refused to be quiet. That morning, I dressed in my cleanest clothes, a gray knit dress that used to belong to my sister, and tied my hair back tight. I didn't look like a lawyer. I didn't look like anyone powerful. I looked like exactly who I was, a cleaning lady trying to be taken seriously in a world that never looked twice at people like me. I went to a local community center, one I'd passed 100 times but never entered. A handwritten sign on the door read, "Free legal aid Wednesdays and Fridays. Immigrant support." Inside, the air smelled like old paper and instant coffee. A receptionist, a young woman with braids and a kind smile, asked me gently, "Do you need help?" I nodded. My voice cracked a little as I spoke. "I've been accused of theft. At my job. I didn't do it. They suspended me. I'm afraid they're going to fire me. I don't know my rights." She took down my name and offered me a cup of tea. "You're not the first," she said quietly. "Sit tight. A lawyer will see you soon." The lawyer's name was Miss Freya Baum, maybe in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a firm but respectful voice. She wore no makeup, just clean lines and confidence. She listened as I told her everything: the toilet, the stolen bag, Gisela's long history of punishing me without cause, the lack of evidence. "Did they give you anything in writing?" she asked. I shook my head. "Just verbal. They said I'm on temporary suspension, no pay." Freya clicked her pen and leaned back. "Anna, they're counting on your silence, on the fact that you don't speak perfect German, on the fear that you'll walk away quietly. But you have rights." She slid a form across the desk. "We're going to file a formal complaint for wrongful suspension. We'll request CCTV footage, demand a written explanation, and if they can't provide evidence, we'll take it to labor court." I stared at her. "Labor court? But I'm just a cleaner." She looked me in the eye. "No, Anna, you're a worker, a citizen of the EU, a single mother who deserves dignity. You're not just anything." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I was scared, but because I'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Truly seen. That afternoon, I went home, picked up Oleg from school, and for the first time in days, I didn't fake my smile. I told him we were going to fight. He blinked. "Fight who?" "The people who think we're small." He didn't understand, not yet, but he hugged me tighter than usual. The next day, I got a message from an old colleague, Magda, another Polish cleaner who had left the job months ago after being punished for taking sick leave. "They're doing it to you now?" she wrote. "They've been doing it to all of us. They just think we won't do anything." I stared at her message. Then I wrote back, "I'm not going to let them win this time. Not this time." She responded with a thumbs up, but what she sent next surprised me. A screenshot of an online forum. Title: Unfair Treatment of Immigrant Cleaners in Berlin. Posted by Freya B. and right beneath it, dozens of comments. Stories like mine, names I recognized, faces I'd passed in hallways. Cleaners, nannies, elderly carers, all of us. Made invisible. But not anymore. Something in me shifted. I wasn't just defending my job. I was stepping into something much bigger. For the first time in my life, I refused to apologize for being who I was. I was Anna Zielinska, and I was going to be heard. When I was a child, my mother used to say, "Silence is what they give you when they don't want to give you justice." I used to think she was being dramatic. Now I know she was right. After my meeting with Miss Freya, something in me clicked. Not just the fight for my job, but the realization that I wasn't the only one. There were dozens, maybe hundreds of women like me, working in the cracks of this city, cleaning offices before dawn, wiping down bathrooms in silence, caring for people who never remembered our names. I wanted to find them. I started with Magda. She met me at a Polish bakery in Nukin. We sat with warm pchki and black tea, both of us bundled up in scarves. She looked older than when I last saw her, thinner too, but her eyes were still fire. "They threatened me with deportation," she said, "even though I'm an EU citizen, just because I asked for sick leave." I clenched my fists. I want to gather others, not for protest, not yet, just to talk, to share what's happened, to listen. No more hiding. Magda nodded slowly. "I know two others who'll come. One's Romanian, the other's from Syria. Both got sacked without reason. One of them still cries every time she talks about it." We set a date, Sunday afternoon. The back room of the community center where I'd met Freya. I called it the quiet room. That Sunday, 5 of us showed up. Me, Magda, Rasha from Syria who had worked as a cleaner at a hospital, Elena from Romania, a single mom like me, and a younger woman named Inga from Latvia, only 23, already broken by the things she'd seen in the homes she cleaned. Tea first. The room was full of silence and tight shoulders. No one knew how to start. So I told them my story. About the bag, the false accusation, the suspension, the humiliation, and the moment I decided I'd had enough. One by one, the others followed. Rasha had been told she looked suspicious after a wallet went missing on her floor. No proof, no apology. Elena had worked 12-hour shifts and was paid for only 7, always under the table, always afraid to complain. Inga was once asked to clean in lingerie by a male client. When she said no, her agency dropped her. As they spoke, something began to shift in the air. We weren't just victims anymore. We were witnesses, and witnesses have power. I took out a notebook. On the first page I wrote, "Things they've done to us. We will not forget." We listed everything, the names of supervisors, companies, tricks, threats. We began building a map of patterns of abuse, of injustice, but also of each other. That night, as we cleaned up teacups and folded chairs, Rasha turned to me and said softly, "You know what this is, right?" I looked at her. "A union," she said, "or at least the start of one." A week later, I received an email from Elite Facility Service Gum. "Dear Miss Zielinska, following an internal review, we have found no conclusive evidence to support the allegation made against you. You are hereby invited to resume your position, effective immediately. Please confirm your availability." I stared at the screen. It was what I wanted or used to want. But now, I wanted more than my job back. I wanted accountability, an apology, dignity, a system that didn't treat women like dirt on a marble floor. I forwarded the email to Freya. She wrote back 5 minutes later, "Let them wait. We're not done yet." And she was right. I wasn't just going to return. I was going to rise. When Freya first told me there was going to be a public hearing on immigrant labor rights at the Berlin Municipal Hall, I laughed. "Me? Speaking?" I said, nearly choking on my tea. "Yes, you," she replied calmly. "You're the reason I pushed for this meeting. They want real stories, not statistics. You're the story." I wanted to say no. My hands shook just thinking about it. Standing in front of a room filled with officials in suits, journalists with cameras, and people who would probably judge my accent before I even opened my mouth. But then I remembered Oleg, his wide eyes when I told him we were fighting back. I remembered Rasha's voice breaking as she spoke about her fear. I remembered how Gisela used to look through me like I was part of the wallpaper. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. So I said yes. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully, not too formal, but neat. Simple makeup, clean shoes. I braided my hair like my mother used to before church. Not because I wanted to impress them, but because I wanted to feel grounded. The hall was already filling up when I arrived. Rows of chairs, cameras on tripods, a panel table up front. I spotted Freya, clipboard in hand, looking calm and focused. Magda was there too, sitting in the third row with Elena and Inga. They waved, small but proud. And then at the corner of the room I saw her, Gisela. She stood next to a man in a navy suit, likely someone from Elite Facilities' PR team. Her expression was unreadable, but she avoided my eyes. For the first time, I think she was nervous. Good. When my name was called, my legs felt like glass. But I walked to the front, placed my notes on the podium, and took a deep breath. And then I spoke. "My name is Anna Zielinska. I came to Berlin 8 years ago from Poland. I work as a cleaner. Or maybe I should say I used to. 3 weeks ago, I was falsely accused of stealing a handbag. No evidence, no apology, just silence. But the truth is, that accusation was only the last drop in a long, dirty bucket. I've been paid late. I've been shouted at for things I didn't do. I've cleaned toilets while people walked over my mop with dirty shoes. I've been treated like I didn't matter, like I wasn't even a person. And it's not just me. There are thousands of women like me from Poland, Romania, Syria, Turkey. We work before sunrise. We raise children alone. We send money home. And we are treated like ghosts. But we are not ghosts. We are workers. We are mothers. We are human beings. And starting today, we refuse to be invisible. The room was quiet for a full 5 seconds, and then applause, not polite clapping. Real applause, loud, raw. Some people stood up. Even a few reporters nodded with respect. I turned and caught Freya's eye. She gave me a small smile, her arms folded proud, but restrained, like always. I walked back to my seat, heart pounding, hands still cold. But I was smiling. And then, Gisela stood up. May I say something? She asked. The moderator hesitated, but nodded. Gisela stepped up to the mic. She didn't look at me not once. Her voice was even polished. We take all allegations seriously, she said. Elite Facility Service prides itself on our commitment to fair treatment and dignity for all workers. If mistakes were made in individual cases, we regret them deeply. It was a textbook answer, cold, impersonal, designed to protect the company, not the people. She turned to leave the podium but then paused, and for the briefest moment, our eyes met. I didn't blink. This time, I was the one who looked through her. Later that evening, as we sat in the community center again, this time with 10 women instead of 5, Magda turned to me and said, "You were brave today." I smiled. "No," I said. "I was just done being quiet." The week after the hearing felt surreal. My phone didn't stop buzzing messages from journalists, labor advocates, even old co-workers I hadn't heard from in years. One text read, "Saw you on TV. Didn't think you had it in you. Respect." No name. But I knew it was one of the cleaners from Elite who used to avoid eye contact in the break room. For the first time in years, people saw me not as a silhouette behind a mop, but as someone with a voice. But with attention came something else, opportunity, and danger. It started with an email. Subject line, private meeting request Elite Facility Service. I opened it slowly, half expecting legal threats, but it was polite. Too polite. Dear Miss Zielinska, in light of recent public attention and your moving testimony, we'd like to invite you to a private conversation regarding your employment and a potential path forward with Elite. We value your contributions to our company and believe in second chances. Warm regards, Martin Refelt, Director of Corporate Affairs. Second chances? For who? Them or me? I showed the email to Freya. She read it, then handed my phone back with a dry smile. They're not apologizing. They're managing damage. What do they want from me? To make it all go away, quietly, with your signature at the bottom of a non-disclosure agreement. And if I go? Freya looked me in the eyes. Then you better go with your spine straight and your voice ready. The next morning, I put on the same gray dress I'd worn to the hearing, not because I had nothing else, but because I wanted them to see that I was still the same person they tried to silence. The Elite headquarters was all chrome and silence. A young assistant with slicked back hair escorted me up. The elevator smelled like pine and expensive polish. I remembered wiping those same doors 3 years ago. Martin Refelt was waiting in a glass office that looked more like an aquarium. Tall, smooth-talking, manicured hands and a smile made of plastic. Miss Zielinska, thank you for coming. I sat across from him. He gestured to a tray of coffee and tea. I didn't touch it. We admire your resilience, he began. And after careful internal review, we believe it would be mutually beneficial to offer you a new role within our organization, one that reflects your leadership potential. I blinked. What kind of role? Community liaison, he said smoothly. You would help us improve communication with our Eastern European workforce, mediate, support, coordinate training, a bridge between the company and the cleaners. It sounded nice, too nice. And the catch? I asked. His smile flickered. We'd naturally ask for confidentiality going forward. We believe in moving on, not dragging past mistakes through the mud. There it was, a leash, disguised as a ribbon. I sat back and looked around the room. Everything was white, silver, expensive, not a speck of dust. Probably cleaned by someone like me, someone invisible. Right before dawn, let me ask you something, I said quietly. If I had stayed silent, if I hadn't spoken at that hearing, would I be sitting here? He didn't answer. I didn't come here for a promotion, I continued. I came to tell you, we're not going away. Not this time. I stood. He rose too, out of habit, surprised. Thank you for the tea, I said, but I'm not for sale. Back outside, the Berlin air was crisp and sharp. I pulled my coat tight and exhaled. I didn't have a fancy title. I didn't have their money or lawyers, but I had something else, a voice, a small army of women who were done being quiet, and my own son who still thought I was a superhero. That evening, we had another meeting at the community center. Rasha, brought cookies. Inga had printed flyers in 5 languages about a new hotline for cleaners facing abuse. Magda was laughing for the first time in weeks. And me? I stood in front of them and said, "They offered me a job, a fake one." I said no. The room erupted in applause. Not the kind you give politicians. The kind you give survivors. We weren't just organizing now. We were building something real, something they couldn't clean away. There's something they don't tell you when you start standing up for yourself. It's not just that. People will try to push you back down. It's how they do it. Quietly, subtly, behind your back. Like a draft in a room with no windows open. The first warning came from Inga. She arrived at our Wednesday meeting, face pale, hands shaking. "My agency called," she said. "They said I missed an appointment I never got. Now they're withholding my next paycheck." "Did they put it in writing?" Freya asked. Inga shook her head. "Just a voicemail. They're trying to scare her," Elena murmured. "It's starting." She was right. Over the next 2 weeks, one by one, we started noticing the cracks. Magda got a surprise safety inspection at her new job and a warning for a mop left leaning the wrong way. Rasha's teenage son was questioned by police after school about domestic disturbances that never happened. Someone followed me home from the supermarket. I couldn't prove it, but I felt it. These weren't coincidences. They were pressure points. They couldn't attack us openly, not after the hearing, not with press attention. So they started squeezing in the shadows, but we didn't stop. In fact, it made us dig deeper. One cold Friday evening, I was going through my old pay slips, the ones I'd kept in a dented tin box under the kitchen sink. I compared hours worked with wages received. Some numbers didn't match. It wasn't huge, a few euros here, 10 euros there, but it added up. I called Elena. She pulled out hers. Same thing. By Sunday, 7 of us had shared our records. Every single one showed irregular deductions. Different reasons. Uniform, damage, late sign-in, cleaning supplies usage. Freya reviewed them all. "This isn't sloppiness," she said. "It's systemic. It's theft." We decided to do something we hadn't done before. We leaked the evidence. Magda sent copies to a friend of her cousin's, a freelance reporter from Der Spiegel. A week later, an article went live. The cleaners who were cleaned out. How a top Berlin company skimmed wages from its workers by Lena Weberth. Article exploded. Screenshots of fake deductions. Anonymous quotes from current employees. Even an audio clip one of our girls had secretly recorded of a supervisor saying, "They won't complain. They don't even know the rules." I stared at the article headline like it was a sunrise after years of night. They tried to bury us in silence. But now, the world could hear us. Of course, the fallout came fast. Elite Facility issued a vague public statement. "We take these allegations seriously. An internal investigation is underway." Translation: stall for time and hope the fire dies down. But we didn't let it. Freya pushed the labor board to reopen old complaints. The community center offered us a permanent room for organizing. And I was invited to speak again. This time, not at a hearing, but at a panel for worker-led reform movements across Europe. When I told Oleg, he grinned. "Do you get to wear a cape this time?" I laughed. "No cape, just courage." He thought about that. "That's cooler anyway." A few nights later, I was locking up the community room when I saw a figure waiting by the gate. Gisela. I froze. She wasn't wearing her usual heels. Just sneakers, a coat too big for her, and no makeup. She looked smaller. "I'm not here to threaten you," she said quickly. "Then why are you here?" She glanced around. "Because they're going to throw me under the bus." That wage theft? I was following orders. "I have proof. I'll share it, but I want protection." My breath caught. We were looking at a woman who had humiliated me, accused me, cost me days of sleep and dignity. And now, she needed me. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened the gate. "You talk to Freya," I said. "We'll listen, but no more lies." She nodded, and just like that, the woman who used to walk past my mop as if I was dirt was now following me into the light. There are victories that feel like warm bread on a cold morning, small, comforting, safe, and then there are victories that burn like fire in your chest. We stood at the edge of both. 3 days after Gisela came forward, we met in a closed room at the community center. The air smelled like cheap instant coffee and damp coats. There were 10 of us now, packed around a plastic table, faces tense, papers everywhere. Freya stood at the front, arms crossed, jaw tight. She handed over everything. She said, everything turned out to be internal emails from elite management discussing deduction targets, a document nicknamed Soft Cuts with names of cleaners and weekly wage shaving suggestions, audio of a senior executive saying, if they complain, threaten. Immigration status. Works every time. The room went silent when that was played. We weren't just stories anymore, we were proof. The next day, Elite Facility sent an offer through their legal team, a financial settlement generous by most standards. Confidentiality agreements for all involved. Gag orders. No admission of wrongdoing. Case closed. They wanted us to walk away with full pockets and closed mouths. We gathered again that evening, this time in Magda's flat, all of us squeezed into her kitchen. Her walls were peeling, her kettle rusted, but her home felt warmer than any courtroom. I could really use that money, Inga whispered. I mean, it's more than I make in a year. So could I, said Elena. It would help with my daughter's braces. Everyone nodded. So did I. I wasn't above it. The temptation, the security, the relief. But then Rasha spoke. Quiet, steady. My husband was tortured for speaking truth. We had to flee Syria because he refused to take hush money from the army. I lost him to that war. If we take the money, we do what the powerful always expect us to do. She looked up, eyes firm. We disappear. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stayed behind to help Freya sort through the files. She didn't say much, just clicked her pen and made notes with that sharp lawyer focus of hers. Then she paused. If you say the word, Anna, I'll reject their offer tomorrow morning. But if you change your mind later, there may not be a second chance. I stared at the pile of paper between us. My hands felt like stones. Do you think we can win? I asked. She looked at me for a long time, then said softly, that's not the real question. I waited. The real question is, do you want to change the system or escape it? I walked home through Kreuzberg that night, passing Turkish bakeries closing up, neon signs flickering, teenagers laughing on the corners. I thought about every toilet I'd ever scrubbed, every woman I'd watched cry in a break room, every time I'd said yes when I wanted to scream no, and I thought about Oleg asleep in our bed, dreaming of heroes. I had no cape, but I had a choice. The next morning, we held a vote, 10 voices, 10 women, 10 votes, unanimous. We would not settle, we would fight. Later that day, I stood outside Elite Facilities headquarters, not as a cleaner, not as a worker begging to be seen, but as a witness, a plaintiff, a woman with a name. And when the reporter from Tagesspiegel asked me, why not take the money? I smiled. We're not fighting for a payout, I said. We're fighting so no one else has to. And that was the moment I knew we hadn't just said no to them. We had said yes to ourselves. There are warnings you can ignore, cold looks, long silences, rumors pass like whispers in a stairwell, and then there are warnings that land like a stone through your window. Mine came in an envelope. No return address. Just my name, scribbled in block letters. Inside, one photo, a blurry image of me walking Oleg home from school, and a note, back off, or he gets hurt next. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there in the kitchen, the paper shaking in my hand, my stomach turning to ice. It had always been a risk. We were poking at power, real power, the kind that wears expensive suits by day and sends threats by night. But this wasn't about me anymore. They had crossed a line, and they would regret it. Freya was already waiting at the community center. When I arrived, clutching the envelope like it was a live wire, she didn't waste time. She called the police, demanded a report be filed, even insisted they assign an officer to check in with Oleg's school daily. They want fear, she said, through clenched teeth. That means we're getting close to something they don't want uncovered. I nodded. I couldn't speak yet. My voice was somewhere deep in my chest, curled up like a wounded animal. That night, Oleg slept in my bed. He asked me if the trial meant I'd be on TV again. Maybe, I whispered. But more importantly, it means people like you will grow up in a world where moms don't get stepped on just because they clean floors. He looked at me for a long moment. I think you're braver than TV heroes. I smiled. But behind it, I was already planning. If they thought this would scare me away, they didn't understand the kind of woman I had become. By the end of the week, the story of the threat had leaked. Not by accident. A journalist from Taz ran the headline, "Cleaning Lady Threatened After Filing Labor Lawsuit. How Far Will Corporate Power Go?" Suddenly, we weren't just fighting wage theft. We were exposing the cost of silence and the price women pay for daring to speak. Support poured in, letters from cleaning unions in Italy, France, and Spain. Messages from nurses, waitresses, au pairs. Women who wrote, "I know that fear. It happened to me too. Keep going. We're behind you." Even strangers left candles at the community center door, little notes taped to glass, too. The women who said no more, and among all that noise, one voice returned, Gisela. She requested another meeting, this time in daylight, at a quiet cafe wedding. I arrived early. She was already there, sipping tea with shaky hands. "They'll come after me next," she said, barely above a whisper. "I'm still on payroll, but they've cut my email access. They're erasing me." I stared at her. The woman who once told me to scrub faster, not talk back, and never question deductions. Now she was shrinking into her coat, looking like someone who had learned too late what it meant to be disposable. "Why did you help us?" I asked. She looked out the window for a long time, then she said, "Because no one helped me when it happened to me. And I became the thing I hated. But you reminded me who I was." Her voice cracked. "I can testify. In court. I'll name names." I didn't thank her. Not yet. But I nodded. "You'll be protected. But don't lie. Not one word." "I won't," she said. We finished our tea in silence. The day of the first hearing arrived. Rain slid down the courthouse windows like quiet tears. I wore the same dress I'd worn to the panel, not out of habit, but as armor. We stood outside the courtroom, 10 women in second-hand coats, worn boots, and fire in our eyes. Inga reached for my hand. "We're not cleaners today," she whispered. I turned to her. "No," I said. "Today, we're witnesses." And we walked in together, not as victims, but as the storm they never saw coming. It took 6 more weeks for the verdict, 6 weeks of waiting, 6 weeks of watching the media swirl, of seeing strangers walk up to us in the street and say, "Thank you," or simply, "I see you now." But the day finally came. Gray skies, soft rain, the kind that makes Berlin feel both sad and honest. We sat in the courtroom, side by side, no longer afraid. Freya stood. Her eyes didn't blink. Her jaw didn't shake. She was more than our lawyer now. She was the iron thread binding us. The judge entered, sat, adjusted her glasses, and read the ruling. "This court finds that elite facility service scum engaged in systemic wage theft, workplace discrimination, and targeted harassment against immigrant female workers over a period of no less than 5 years. My breath stopped. The company is ordered to compensate affected employees, issue public apology, and submit to government oversight for the next 3 years. Furthermore, this court recommends criminal investigation into key executives responsible for policy implementation." It was quiet, too quiet, and then, Inga began to cry. Elena put her hand over her mouth. Rasha bowed her head and whispered something in Arabic. A prayer, maybe. A thank you. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there. Finally, still, like a bell that had been ringing too long, and had at last found silence. A week later, Elite Facilities' official apology appeared on every major German newspaper's website. "We deeply regret the pain caused by our failure to protect and respect our workers." I read the headline once, then folded the page, slid it under the leg of our wobbly table, and got back to making dinner. Oleg had soccer practice. Magda had a dentist appointment. The world hadn't stopped, but it had changed, just enough. A month after the trial, Freya pulled me aside at the center. "I have a proposal," she said. "A real one this time." I laughed. "No more surprise job offers, please. This one's different. There's a coalition in Brussels. They're building a European worker-led alliance. They want you to speak, maybe even help train women like you in Spain, France, Czechia. Tell your story. Teach them how to build what you built." I blinked. "You think I'm a trainer?" She smiled. "I think you're a spark. And Europe is full of dry wood." I didn't answer right away. That night, I sat by Oleg's bed. He was asleep, one hand wrapped around his worn drawing, the one where I wore a cape and cleaned the world. And for the first time, I thought, maybe I wasn't just scrubbing away dirt. Maybe I had been preparing the ground for something to grow. 2 weeks later, I boarded a train to Brussels, a small suitcase, a wrinkled dress, a heart that was scared, but steady. As Berlin faded behind me, I opened my notebook and wrote, "My name is Anna Zielinska." I was a cleaner. I was invisible, but not anymore. And I smiled, because I knew somewhere in a hallway, a bathroom, a silent shift before dawn, another woman would see me on a screen, or read my name in an article, or hear my story in her language. And she would realize, she is not alone. She never was.